Hey everyone, welcome. Baron here. Today we're going to be talking about a little farming experiment I did based on Cyclin's Guardian farming strategy, which I'm going to link down in the description. So to put it briefly, Cyclin experimented with 3 variations on the same theme, doing rapid-fire rounds of 4 Guardian maps at a time, culminating with a Maven invitation for those 4 Guardians. Cyclin experimented with Shaper, Elder, and Conqueror invitations, but of those 3, there is a pretty clear winner in my book, the Shaper Guardians. I personally have no intention of farming the boss at the end, so the Cyrus fragments are not ideal for me. You really get a lot of the profit there from fighting the boss. I'm going to be selling the fragments instead. And then you go to the Elder Guardians. All 4 of them have these annoying invulnerability phases, whereas for the Shaper Guardians, only one of the 4 has annoying invulnerability phases. Well, 2, I suppose, if you count the Hydra, but if you can spike him down fast enough, he won't get to it. Whereas the Chimera, it's mandatory. So still much better than the Elder Guardians. Other bonuses there, the Shaper Guardian maps are all predictable linear layouts, so that means it's way easier to find the other content that we're going to be adding to the map on our way to the boss room. Unlike the Conqueror or Elder maps, which those are entirely random, they're based on your atlas. They could be really crappy layouts and you'd have to horizon orb them into something halfway decent. Which maps you can horizon them into will depend on the tier of the map. It's just a little irritating, and I like the predictability of the Shaper map layouts. And speaking of horizon orbs and the Shaper map layouts, worth noting that these 4 maps belong to kind of a separate little pool all of their own. So that when you horizon orb one of these, you can only ever get one of the other Shaper Guardian maps. So it's very easy to make sure that you don't have an odd or uneven number of these Guardian maps. You can always have an even number by just horizoning them into whatever one you need. So, for this project, I used kind of my pet build that I put together a little earlier in the league, the int stacking Doriani's prototype Flicker Strike Raider. This is not a perfect build by any means, but it is fast, and it was good enough to finish a Wave 30 simulacrum under the right conditions, so I figured it would be up to this task, and fortunately I was right. It went well. It was very easy to speed through the maps as a raider with all that increased onslaught effect, the movement speed per frenzy charge, and then you get Flicker Strike's teleport range. All goes together very well. I do think that's about all there is to say about the build in terms of how it interacts with this strategy, but if anybody's interested in some kind of detailed video workup or a build guide or anything, let me know. I can look into that. But for now, let's talk about the Atlas passive tree. We're going to talk about how we're going to use the tree to bolster our main strategy, and then which of the ancillary side mechanics we're going to pick up to support that main strategy. So on top of the Guardian bosses and the invites themselves, that's really the money draw for this strategy, I also followed Cyclin's example and included a couple of very fast, high profit margin mechanics that aren't going to substantially add to the completion time of the map. But before we get to those, I want to draw your attention to the first standout feature, which is actually notable by its absence. This is one of the very few Atlas trees you'll come across that won't include anything about the altars. No Eater of Worlds altars, and no Exarch altars. And the reason for that is very simple. We can't use them. Altars are mutually exclusive with Maven witnessing, and those Maven invites are really the main profit drivers, like I said, so altars are a no-go. On the bright side, though, that does give us several extra points to play with. And the first of those are going to be spent up here, making sure that the quantity of items that gets dropped in the Maven's Crucible when we do the invites is higher. This is going to ensure that those crescent splinters, which add up to a Maven invite, or a Maven, I forget what it's called, you get more of those. And those are, like I said, the main profit drivers. So these are very important, not optional nodes up here. Then after that, we're taking a very standard package you might be familiar with if you've ever seen or done any kind of boss rushing strategy. Very basic. We're going to take the nodes that give the final map boss a chance to drop expensive sellable maps. So Elder Guardian maps, Shaper Guardian maps, Conqueror maps, and Synthesis maps. Maven Writs, by the way, is the phrase I was looking for. So this is a very standard package because we're going to be blasting through these maps in just a couple minutes, and we're going to do a whole ton of them. So the more map turnover your strategy has, the more effective these nodes are going to be. After that, we're also going to add in kind of what you call the gimme more mechanics strategy. So down here, we are blocking almost everything, but everything except for heist down here. And the goal of that, of course, is that each thing we block gives us a little bit more base chance to encounter extra content. And we'll go into, in just a minute, what kind of extra content we're hoping shows up. We also take stream of consciousness because we have no need to modify our maps. We're not using scarabs. We're not using growing hordes. Our goal is to get to the boss pretty quick. So this is really ideal here. Stream of consciousness adds a ton of base chance to get extra content. The main two that we're hoping show up, not the only ones, but the main two are heist and essence. And this is pretty straightforward stuff. You've probably come across this in other farming strategies before. Heist is literally a single-click mechanic. Just the heist caches show up in your map. You click them, they drop items, you pick them up. Some other good things that come along with it, though. There is this new Atlas passive that has Huck, one of the rogues, accompany you the first time you open a smuggler's cache. In each map, he kind of pops out of it or teleports in or whatever. And he's wearing his heist gear, which is important because his heist gear can have a haste aura on it. So you do not have to reserve the haste aura with your mana. You can just rely on good old Huck showing up. And he will bring it to the party with you for free, and that's going to speed up your map process. Now, my build wasn't super ideal for that because with Flicker Strike, I was often teleporting out of range of his aura, but he would pretty quickly run over to me and catch up. So I was definitely getting some benefit out of it, and your build may get even more benefit out of it if you're not running Flicker Strike like I am. Some of the other heist passives here, this one is great. I love this one. Gives you a little bit of a chance to find a ton of smuggler's caches in your map, and then so that's like a nice little dopamine boost every once in a while when you find this. It's great. And then this one, just straight up more blueprints. Blueprints have a chance to be revealed, all good. More deception contracts, which are the expensive ones that you really want to sell. The only thing to note is that this little section over here, Cyclone, in his strategy, did take this. I did not. This is increasing the value of the targets at the end of your heist contracts. And for me personally, I doubt that I'm going to be running these contracts myself. And generally, from what I've seen, people who are buying contracts don't really care too much about the value of the target at the end. So honestly, this little wheel just kind of struck me as a waste of points. This is totally optional, discretionary. You can put points into this if you want. I chose to put them into some extra map sustain instead. We're not killing a ton of monsters, but we were still getting fairly steady map drops because I put more points into the 4 shaping wheels. You can do that. You can do this wheel. You can take something like strong boxes. This part is pretty optional. Next up, we've got essences, the next kind of fairly mandatory mechanic for this because they are easy, they are profitable, they're quick, and this, again, probably familiar to you. Many farming strategies are going to include this package. We just take all the essence nodes. The essences we find in those blocks of ice are a tier higher. There's a strong chance for them to be duplicated as long as the right tier is in there. Each individual block of ice has a chance to have 3 extra essences in it, which is great. And then just the map flat adds another essence to the map on top of what we hope we're going to get from adding all this base chance from extra content. We hope that we're going to get some from that because essences are considered base content. And then we automatically get at least 1 for free. And those are the main ones, but I did want to focus in on just the last few points because it's something that often flies under the radar. These guys right here, the Trial of Glory wheel. These are really quick. I think a lot of people don't give these the attention or respect that they deserve. They're super quick because the improved trials are labeled. They're very well labeled. They're shiny. They're called out. You just hover over it and it says it's an advanced or improved trial or whatever, and you know that you can pop into that one, and that means that you can skip all of the trials that aren't improved. So this is going to overall add very little time to your average map run, but you get the opportunity to get one of these improved tokens, which is either a dedication. What are they? The offering is the normal one. You either get a dedication, like a tribute maybe to the goddess, and then a gift to the goddess, which is the big important one that's worth several divines. So it's a 1 in 3 chance to get one of the ones that's worth a good chunk of change, but not a ton, or the big drop. And like, it's free. It takes you an extra 30 or 40 seconds to sprint through the trial here. Only advice I give you is if your build is like mine. So I am an energy shield build, and I have taken the Ghost Reaver Keystone, which totally disables my energy shield recovery and just or recharge rather, and it gives me a bunch of leech instead. I bring Orbs of Regret or refund points into the maps with me so that I can quickly unspec this if I find an improved trial. This just helps me recover from the traps in there. There's not much to leech off of, so my recovery is disabled with this guy. It's more than worth the price of entry. A regret orb is worth like a fraction of a chaos, and you're going to get way more than that at the end, even if you don't get the top tier option. So for me, the extra 2 seconds it takes to unspec and respec this point is well worth it to make sure that I don't die to the traps. So let's see now. I think that takes us to the end of the Alistry, more or less. So let's talk investment. What did it cost to run this experiment? Well, I decided to do 20 sets of the invitation run, so that will work out to be 80 maps and 20 invitations, an invitation every 4 maps. The math makes it so to start with, it's 120 chaos per set, so it's 60 chaos for the invitation, and then around 15 chaos each for the 4 maps. 4 times 15 adds up to another 60, you get 120. The only other investment beyond that are a couple of very cheap compasses. I was able to get these in a massive bulk for very, very cheap, and I suspect you will too because they are high-weighted compasses. These are options that often come along. And the two we're taking are an extra heist cache compass, which runs you 4.5 chaos, and then an essence compass, which runs you 5 chaos. And remember, these compasses have 4 uses each, so a single compass is going to cover your whole invitation cycle. So our total investment per cycle, when you add it all up, is around 130 chaos, plus or minus a few chaos for rolling maps and invites, but honestly, this does not take a whole lot of time and currency. You don't need too much specific here. The only thing to keep in mind is just make sure that you're rolling your invites for 70 or more quantity with no mods that'll brick your build, because that 70 quantity line is where you get the most amount of splinters. Like, if you get more quantity than that, great, but you're probably not going to get more than 5 to 6 splinters. So just roll for that, and it's very quick. Otherwise, you don't need too much on these. So for those of you who are keeping score at home, if we've got 130 chaos per run, and we did 20 runs, well, that's 2,600 chaos, or around 10.6 divine as an investment. If you haven't done a mid to high investment strategy before, that may sound like a lot, but keep in mind, you can kind of invest as you go. You can buy a run or 2 of this at a time, and that's no big deal. But that's all to the side. I think what most of you really want to hear about is, how effective was this? How profitable was this? Is this even worth doing? Well, in my opinion, it was pretty darn worth it. It was pretty darn effective. So here's the stash tab where I was storing all the results, all the stuff that I picked up and wanted to tally. We're going to take a look at the stash tab first, and then we'll dive into some of the numerical data. So over here along the left side, this is just the stuff that doesn't really fit into any of the main categories or stuff I was too lazy to organize. So these are things like maps with good base types, scarabs, essences, bubblegum currency, that kind of thing. Honestly, this whole left side, not a huge percentage of the overall profit. And I actually went ahead and, to be very fair and very conservative, I had Excellence, the profit tallying program that examines your stash tabs. I had Excellence ignore anything where the total number of those items, if they didn't add up to 10 chaos or more for however many of them you had, it wouldn't even include it. It just drops it. So like a couple of the essences, probably the cartographers, chisels, some of the unique maps, all that stuff isn't even going to count into the profit numbers that we're going to look at. Just to be conservative, because I don't know, I'm probably not going to sell those things. It's not worth the time to me, but in any event. So that's the left side. Over here on the right, well, we start getting into some of the more interesting stuff. The blueprints over here on the far right, well, the ones other than the unusual gems, they might end up being a little hard to sell. They're not very popular right now. So what I did was I devalued these other three types of blueprints pretty hard in my profit estimate. I really lowballed how much that I anticipate that I'm going to be able to sell them for, and it's possible that I may not even be able to sell them at all. And if so, well, again, they're not a ton of the percentage of the overall profit, so I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But really, just the ability to sell the unusual gems and the revealed unusual gems. Those are the big heavy hitters there. Then as for contracts, as you can see, it's all deception, baby. I didn't include anything but deception contracts here. I did pick up non-deception contracts, but I just threw them into my usual heist locker, and I didn't count them for this experiment because I honestly doubt I'm going to be able to sell non-deception contracts. It's maybe perception for 1 or 2 chaos each, maybe. But aside from that, I don't think anybody's really in the market for non-deception contracts, so that's all we included. What's up next? So the middle section, yeah, let's look at this. Between the contracts and the blueprints, these are just some kind of random miscellaneous drops that don't fit neatly into many other categories, but like, so a large clustered jewel, it has a good eye level and a good base type. I might be able to sell this for 25, 30C, maybe. Got a few awakened gems from the invites. Unfortunately, the invites, other than running the Maven herself, don't drop the, can't drop the good awakened gems. So these are only worth like 10 or 20 chaos each. And, we get some orbs of conflict from the invites. Those are good. They're fine. They're worth double-digit chaos, so they're worth including in the tally. But, it's not going to break the strategy wide open or anything like that. The ones that I really want to draw your attention to, the kind of high variance, high profit things that I managed to find over the course of this strategy were a raw divine drop, which I got from an Arcanist strongbox. You always want to open those guys up. A gift to the goddess, one of those improved lab trials. A Voidborn Reliquary Key. These are just in the general drop pool. Random drop. You kill enough monsters, you'll get one eventually, but there's no guarantee you'll get one in your run. So I did create 2 versions of the profit calculation. One that includes these kind of high variance things, and one that does not. And then the last item was a Cortex map. So we did take the Atlas nodes that give us a chance of getting a synthesis map. I got 3 in total. 2 of the cheap ones, and 1 of the very expensive one. So again, that conservative calculation, the second version of the profit that I'm going to show you, will just be excluding things like the Cortex and the Reliquary Key and the Divine Orb, all that stuff. But I think from there we're going to move over to the bottom right here, which is where we really get into the meat and potatoes of the profit from this strategy. So here you've got the influence maps, which we just discussed a little bit. These are dropped by the Guardians themselves, or occasionally, in the case of the Shaper Guardian maps, these can also be dropped from the invites at the end. Let's see. Then we go over to the Maven Writs here. These are, like I said, the largest driver of the profit. These are each worth, let's take a look what we're up to right now. Each worth a little bit more than a Divine, especially since I'm able to sell them in a fairly sizable bulk to somebody who's just running Maven over and over and over again. And then on the far right here, we've got the fragments. Each Guardian is going to drop one of these fragments, aligning with which Guardian it was. And then you can see there are some spares up here, because occasionally the invite will also drop random fragments. It's not guaranteed, but you get a few spares up here. So down here I have the 20 sets from the 20 rotations that I ran. And then you can see up here we've got, 12 spare ones. So a little bit over half the time, I guess, on average. From here, let's just quickly address a couple unusual features. You may have noticed a couple remaining things that I haven't addressed yet. Kind of little side issues here. So down here, in between the Maven Writs and the Shaper Fragments, you've got a couple of formed invitations, which is the one we're running, and a few Divine Orbs. So what's going on with that? Well, in this strategy, you are pretty likely to self-sustain many, but not all, of your formed invitations. So I mark them down as costing 60 chaos each, but as you go, you're often going to find them. And so it's, it's a question of, do I chalk it up as profit or cost, or how do I do it? The way that I settled this to make it fair was simply that as I found them, rather than go out and trade somebody for them, I would use them myself, but to indicate as part of the strategy that this was a cost savings, that I didn't have to pay for these, I instead paid myself into here, I paid myself the divine orbs, 4 to 1, 4 invitations to 1 divine orb, while still accounting for that 60 chaos cost in the cost side of the profit calculation. So suffice to say, it's okay if you didn't quite understand that, but it is a fair calculation that neither gives me too much credit nor cheats me in terms of how much profit I made. And then you keen-eyed viewers may have noted up here there's a fragment that doesn't belong exactly, a fragment of shape. That is one of the fragments that the shaper himself drops. And there's a good reason that that's there. When I started this strategy, my original intent was to do half and half. I would run half of these invites and then run the shaper afterwards by popping in the 4 fragments. That's how you face the shaper. And then for the other half, I was going to just sell the fragments. Well, I did one attempt, as you can see. It was successful, but it was ugly. This Flicker Strike build is just not built for that fight, unfortunately. There are some bosses that this Flicker Strike can go up against and be okay, and Shaper just isn't one of them. His sustained Shaper Beam, all the Shaper Balls, it's just very dicey. You know, you're either going to die a lot or you're going to have low DPS uptime. So after that first run went pretty bad, I was like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to do the rest of these the old-fashioned way and sell the fragments, and I will take this into my profit calculations. It's okay because in general, one of these is typically approximately equivalent, you know, more or less a few chaos to 4 of these, you know, the price of entry. So this isn't going to disrupt the profit calculation too much. Same with the Feared here, which I dropped from the Shaper. It's worth like 10 chaos. It's not going to interfere with the profit calculation too much. If anything, yeah, I could have just, anyways, doesn't matter. So let's see. Oh, last couple things here. So there's a random divine here and a random like stack of chaos over here that looks out of place. These are where I, throughout this strategy, was taking some good base types that I found with the Shaper Influence, eye level 85, things like shields, rings, and amulets, occasionally other things, but mostly those, and throwing them into a 1 divine dump tab. And as it turns out, pretty quickly, a couple people wanted to buy some of the items in there. So I got 2 divines. One person paid me in chaos for that. And again, those are not going to go into the conservative version of the calculation. I figure, hey, maybe you don't get lucky or you know, nobody's looking for those items that you find at that time. But I think it's reasonably possible that you could get some items if you just use a dump tab. You know, you don't need to price out everything yourself. Just see if anybody needs some of those Shaper Influence items. For all I know, some of them might have been buying them just as a base, not for what mods rolled on them. I truly don't know. So I think that is it for the tab. But what I'd like to do is pull up our numbers. Let's pull them up over here. So, for the numbers, to start with, how long did this take me? Well, like I said, the character is pretty speedy, but then on the other hand, counterbalancing that is the fact that I kind of suck. So, some pros and cons there. I think the build was probably held back a little bit by my skill ceiling. So I think that you could probably do as well as this with a not quite as fast build if you're better at it. So Cyclone, who you know was the inspiration for this strategy, he was saying that he was taking maybe 8 to 10 minutes to run a full set of 4 maps and an invite. I was taking more on the lines of like 10 and a half, 11 minutes. So my average time per run wound up being just over 11 minutes, so that the whole experiment was done in just shy of 4 hours of gameplay time spread across several sessions, you know, sessions of 30, 45, 60 minutes. I do work full time, so this is just me fitting it around before and after my job. I will note that I had the timer running for most of the time that I was playing. I would really only turn it off during the times when I was annotating all this stuff over here. I figure somebody who's imitating this strategy probably isn't taking these kind of detailed notes. So I would pause it if I was typing something out. But by and large, if I was running the maps, portaling in and out, putting stuff in my stash, trading with somebody, I would tend to keep the timer on there. So I think it was a fair estimate of the actual amount of time that I spent doing the work of, you know, doing the strategy. So let's turn our attention to the left-hand table here with the overall gains and losses, which were very nice, as you can see. The Excellence Next number, which again, Excellence being a program which tallies up the value of the items in your stash tabs, this is just the one tab where I was tossing everything I got from the experiment. The tab we just looked at a moment ago. And again, to remind you, I was only counting things where however many of those I had, if I had 10 of a certain map or whatever, the total value of those things needed to add up to at least 10 chaos. The idea being, I don't want to be doing transactions for 2, 3, 4 chaos. Like, I probably shouldn't even be doing transactions for 10 chaos, but I set that as the lower limit. You've got to be worth at least 10, or you're not even going to get counted in here. So what did get counted in here? That is our middle table. And as you can see at the top, I've labeled it in a bright green because it's our winner by almost a margin of two times. But the Maven Writs were far and away the winner. This is why you want to get to the boss as quick as possible. You don't want to waste a whole lot of time on the way, because your profit per minute is best when you are focusing down the invites and getting those Maven Writs from the invites. And for the rest of it, you can see it's not the little onesie-twosie crap. This is all stuff that's, for the most part, worth dozens or hundreds of chaos. I did go ahead and highlight in red those items that I drew your attention to earlier. Those high variability items, maybe you'll get them, maybe you won't. I happen to think that if you're running 20 plus runs of this strategy, you're bound to get lucky with something. Maybe it won't be these exact items. Maybe it'll be like an Einhar memory or something like that that's worth a few divines. But I think at some point, if you're killing enough monsters here, you're going to get lucky and get something. And in fact, the gift to the goddess, the improved trials, I think your luck is liable to be better than mine, probably by a substantial margin. I got ridiculously unlucky. I was running into, thanks to our improved chance of, our base chance of running into extra content, I was running into a trial once every, it was like 2/3 of maps or 3/4 of maps. It was very frequent that I would see a trial in the map, and of those, you're supposed to get 1/5 of them being improved. I did not get 1/5. Of the 60 plus of those that I encountered, one of them was a portal to a special improved trial. Now, on the lucky side, my luck swung, and the item it dropped was a gift to the goddess, which is the most expensive of the three. But I'm figuring that even if you don't get a gift to the goddess, you're going to get a few more of these special trials than I did. So even if it's the kind of less expensive ones, that should hopefully balance out for you, and you may even do better than me. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, these are really the only truly unlikely drops. The rest of these things you're just going to get. You're going to get maps. You're going to get essences. You're going to get blueprints. You're going to get writs. So I think the only other thing to note about this excellence total here is that this is actually higher than it looks. It's actually around 8,200. I had already just gone ahead and subtracted out the cost. That 2,600, I've already subtracted that. So the actual gross amount of currency that I brought in was in the 8,200 range in that excellence tab. And then I just subtracted out the costs already. Let's see, other things to note. Yeah, let's go over to the pie chart. So I'm personally a very visual learner. Maybe you are too. This maybe will help you get a grip on where the profit is coming from here. Like I said, Maven Writs, blueprints. Might be a little hard to sell the non-gem blueprints, but the majority of that profit is coming from the gem blueprints, which are going to be pretty easy to sell. The fragments, easy to sell. Voidborn Reliquary Key, obviously you can take that or leave that. Maybe you'll get one. Probably you won't. They're pretty rare. And then the dropped form category, I want to address this. This is what I talked about a little earlier with self-sustaining my formed invitations. And again, like I said, I kept the 60 chaos cost of the formed invitation in my cost tab, or my cost section of the calculation, and then I would just add in as profit anytime that I dropped one, because that was kind of detracting from my cost, which is the equivalent of profit. Hopefully you get the idea there. Yeah, so this should hopefully give you a decent idea where the profit was coming from. I guess I'll just mention I did self-sustain around 75% of my formed invites. I think common experience is between 2/3 and 3/4, so I might have been a little bit on the high end of average, but I think you can expect somewhere in that range that you'll self-sustain more than half, but definitely not all of your invites as you run. I probably only ended up buying 5 or 6, honestly, and then otherwise just using the ones that I found. So let's pop back over to the tables over here, because I want to focus on this bottom table here, which is arguably the most important one, detailing the total sum of chaos with and without big drops, which then we subtract the investment, so we get the net gain for with and without big drops. The hours taken, of course, is the same. It took just shy of 4 hours. And then we divide it all out and we get 1,600 or 1,019 chaos per hour. We apply the 245 chaos divine exchange ratio, and we get, if you include your lucky drops, which I think you're going to get some of, it was around 6.6 divines an hour, and without big drops, it was still over 4. And what I want to make sure you keep in mind here is that this is not your dad's exalt ratio. Remember, so when we were using exalts before the changeover to divines, it was very common in a lot of leagues for divines, or pardon me, for exalts to be worth between like 100 and 130 chaos. Those days are gone. The divines now are worth 245 to 250 chaos. So, you know, it's no longer that you need a strategy that's getting you 11 or 12 exalts an hour to be profitable. Something being in the 6 to 7 divine range is pretty darn good. And even, you know, just getting above 4 is not too shabby at all. It's not like, you know, the be-all, end-all strategy, but I like it personally. And honestly, on top of that, like, it's fun. Like, I was genuinely enjoying the strategy. You get to mix it up with every few maps. You pop out and you do an invite instead. You know, it's every map is that kind of will they, won't they? Will I get the improved trial? Will I get the map which has like 7 or 8 heist caches in it? Those are always nice little dopamine bursts that keep you looking on the horizon to that next map. So yeah, it's just overall, it's fun, and also you can bang these out quickly. Like if you've only got 15 minutes to sit down and play, you can bang out a full invitation cycle, no problem. So that makes it nice and modular, plug and play. You know, you can play for as little or as long as you have at that moment. So to sum it all up, I can definitely recommend the strategy. This is not a strategy that gets ruined by more people doing it. This is not a tragedy of the commons situation, because the Maven Writs, the Fragments, the Guardian maps, those are always going to be in demand. You know, basically everybody in the game would have to be doing this strategy to force the demand or to force the price down. So I'm not worried about that. Everybody have fun, feel free. Like I said, the non-gem blueprints, they might take a little while to sell, or they might not sell at all, but they truly are a small percentage of the profit. So I'm not going to lose any sleep if I don't sell those. Honestly, I think the thing that I can say to best drive home how much I recommend this strategy is that I'm actually going to stick with it a while longer, even though my official tallying for this video is done. Normally, when I spend several days working on a strategy, my brain suddenly goes like, "Ooh, squirrel," and picks some other fun-looking strategy, and, you know, I get diverted and go over and do that. And not the case this time. It was fun, it was effective, it was profitable, so I'm going to roll with it a while longer, and that's honestly the best endorsement I can give it. And I hope you give it a try too, but that's all for this video. Take it easy, everybody.